Nate, video, camera. Let's learn some Hey guys, it's Nate, and I'm here to talk about that same camera I keep talking about, the Canon EOS M3. In this first part of a multi-part series, I don't know how many parts it's going to be. We're going to go over the menu system of the EOS M3, and you might be wondering why the hell would I want to watch a movie or a video about menus? That's actually a pretty good question. It seemed relevant to me. If you just bought this camera and you don't like reading the manual, you might find some value in just kind of being walked through all the different little settings. Some of the settings change based on the mode, and so you might find this helpful. Or, as I was recording this, Canon decided they were going to bring this camera to the States. Glad I went to the other side of the world to buy it. Since it's going to be showing up in the States, and if you're in the States, you might be considering getting this camera. And you might want to compare it with the features of another camera and see what all it does or doesn't do. And so here's just a little preview of before it arrives. Or you just have like a lot of time to spare, or you're playing this in the background and you didn't realize what it was. That's okay too, I suppose. So this video, I'll go ahead and tell you, it's a little lengthy. I don't quickly just breeze through all the settings. I try to go into each one a little bit, try to explain what it does or why you might want to use that particular setting or why you don't need to worry about it at all. And so yeah, it's not a 3-minute video. And actually, this is just the first part. I need to do other ones where I go through other sections of it. This one really focuses on just like the shoot menu, like the first tab, and only for certain modes of the camera because there's just so much stuff in there. And actually this will be probably be the longest one just because there's so much stuff to cover. So if you can just survive through this one. The other ones that I do later, they'll be shorter and a little bit more succinct, and a lot more stuff in those are shared, and so you won't have to worry about them all being this long. One other quick thing to note is, as I was recording these, everything seemed correct, but as I was editing these, I realized sometimes words were incorrect. And that happens. We say something, we have it in our brain, and by the time it gets out, it's all jacked. So in the rare occurrence that I get something incorrect and I catch it later, or something else is wrong, that's where SIA comes in. And SIA is spelled C-Y-A. And what SIA is here for is quality control or quality assurance. Basically, SIA will show up whenever there's like a little correction or something that needs to be adjusted or just needs some help. And so SIA could pop up down here. SIA could be up there. SIA could be here. Anywhere, really. And it's just there to help. So one last thing. And this one might be important if there's just a particular setting you're curious about. And what I've done is, in the description of this particular video, I've made basically a little table of contents that'll kind of jump you to each little setting or to a section of settings if it was really short. So that way, if there's just something particular that you're interested in learning about, you can click on that. Or you can sit through the whole thing. Who wouldn't want to do that? So sit back, relax, learn, watch, listen, make a sandwich, or whatever else you want to do. I don't know. So now let's get into the exciting world of camera menus. Yay. Okay, let's get into the menus of the EOS M3. At the moment it's in manual mode, but if I just hit the menu button, it'll go into the menu, oddly enough. And this is the very first tab, the shoot tab, and this is the first one of the shoot menus. So it says shoot 1 over to the right. You see that there's 5 sections in the manual mode. This is true for the custom mode, the manual mode, the aperture priority mode, and the shutter priority mode. So I'll be covering all of those together. So first on the list is image quality. You see it's at the very top. It's the first one. And so if you hit the set button, you can select which formats you want your images to be stored in. Now you can do RAW, you can do JPEG, you can do RAW and JPEG, at least for these custom manual aperture priority, shutter priority modes. And by using the dial on the shutter, you can switch between RAW or no RAW. And by using the dial, you can figure out or select which JPEG option you want. There's different sizes and different qualities of some of the sizes. And one thing that you can see up here, this is an empty card, you can see how many of those images you can store on the card that you have. This is a 16 gig, I just formatted it. And so if I get rid of RAW and I just want to shoot large JPEG, I can fit 1690. If I want to do the smallest, I can fit apparently over 10,000. Let's see if we can get something to a reasonable number. So this one, 8,424, if I want to store that size, but I usually include the RAW image in there, and then I usually have the large JPEG just as a backup, just in case. I have a couple memory cards, so I'm not too worried about the storage size of only being able to shoot 387 pictures. I'm pretty good about shooting, coming home, getting them onto a computer, formatting the card. So if it was a concern, or while I was shooting, if it was starting to run low, I'd either go back through the images, delete some, or adjust the settings, maybe get rid of the JPEG so that I could take a few more shots. So obviously that choice is up to you. I use the JPEG as a backup just in case for some reason the RAW gets written incorrectly. That has never happened where the memory card is fine, but for some reason just that RAW file got corrupted. But just in case, I put it on there. Like I said, I have a couple of memory cards, so I'm not too worried about the extra storage that it takes up. So that is the image quality setting. Now, going next to the still image aspect ratio, by selecting that, this is what ratio you want to shoot, obviously, the image in. Now, you can do 3:2, which is the ratio of the sensor itself, or if you wanted to shoot widescreen, you can do 16:9 or 4:3. If you wanted to shoot something specific for Instagram, you can do 1:1. Now, one thing to note with these image aspect ratios is that as you select these, and you might be able to see it, but the image might be a little bit too dark to see it. Between 3:2 and 16:9, you can see little bars show up at the top, then they go away when I get rid of it. What that can help you do is, let's say you were shooting something for Instagram at a 1:1, even though as of a couple days ago, they support more than 1:1. But if you still wanted to shoot like that, by selecting this, your live view kind of crops into the image so you can frame it as a 1:1 and then take that picture. And if you're shooting JPEG, it will actually crop the image to 1:1. So that JPEG that you get out of there will be 1:1. The image to the left and the right of it will not exist. It will have been cropped off in the camera when it was stored. However, if you shoot RAW and you import that RAW into any kind of post-processing software, Lightroom or Photoshop or other ones, iPhoto supports RAW. What you'll see is that when you bring it in, the image will be cropped to that 1:1 by default. However, you can bring that information back. And actually, let me just do this as 1:1. Let me take a picture real quick, and then I'll go over to the computer and show you what I mean. Now we're on a computer, and here's the images. Well, the image, I guess, but I shot it in RAW and in JPEG, so we can see the difference between the two. And what you can see is, here's both the images. They look pretty much the same. They are probably slightly different because the JPEG probably got some processing done to it. It does look a little bit lighter right here than it does right here. That's for a picture style. We'll talk about that later. But the main thing that we're talking about here is the image ratio. So I shot this with the 1:1 because this is all about some Instagram, and who doesn't love that? But here's the two images. Now, they look the same here. Like I said, this RAW file does get the 1:1 ratio applied to it, but you can get that back. The JPEG, that's just there forever. There's your image. I hope you liked it. So just to kind of show you what I'm talking about, when you select this image, let me go into the good old develop module, and it says no photo selected because I guess I didn't know I clicked on it. So here is, let me bring up the information, the Canon RAW 2, maybe? I don't know what it stands for, but it's the RAW file. So as you see, it's all square and stuff, but if I click on this, here's all this stuff that got cropped off. But it's still there. Like if I wanted to bring it back, granted it's all black and kind of underexposed, but let's just
let's just bring it back. Come back to me. Oh, let's unlock this. So we can just make it whatever size we want. Boom. So it's all there. And then to actually see what's going on in there, let's just say, oh yeah, there's room there. So that's what you can do. That's the image ratio in the raw file. The information is still there. It's just pre-cropped to it. But if I go to the JPEG file, it's been cropped. And you ain't getting that back. It's done. Over. And sometimes that's okay. But just in case you're wondering, that ratio thing, it applies to the JPEG file only, not the raw file. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go back to the exciting world of camera menus. Yay!
Okay, so coming back, let's go back to the menu here. Shooting information display is next. And what this does is it shows what information shows up on the display as you're shooting, just as the name suggests. So display switching, you get a few different displays you can cycle through. And these first two are configurable. The little check mark means that it will display or it won't display. And as you're shooting, you cycle through these by hitting the info button, and I'll show you here in just a second. But if I go into this, I can set it by, turn it on and off by hitting the set button. I can figure out for this custom display what I want to show by hitting the info button. And I can do the shooting information, which will have, the metering and the shutter speed and aperture and all that stuff. I can do the histogram if I want, a grid display if I want, and then a level if I want. And then it's the same thing with this one where I get the same options as well. And then the third one is just a no information display. So just in case you want to see just the image, nothing else around it except for the image and then the focus point, you can see that. And then the fourth one is just all of the controls, all of the settings for the thing. You don't see the image, but you see all the settings. This one you can't customize. The third one, the no info display, you can't customize. You just turn it on and off. And these two you can customize. So I don't want that one. For this one, let's do histogram. Now let's do shooting info, no histogram. Let's turn on the grid, turn off the level. And for this one, that's what I had that one set up as. So we'll turn on the histogram for that one, turn off that, and then turn on the level. And then if I hit menu, now before I show you the results of that, let me just go through the rest of these real quick. The grid display, you have two grids to choose from. The first one is kind of a rule of thirds grid. This one is a 3x5 grid, the grid 2 is probably better for aligning things, making sure the lines are straight. Grid 1 is more helpful if you want to use that rule of thirds to compose your image. So I'm going to set it to the 1 just so it's a little bit cleaner. It takes up, covers up less of the image. And then for the histogram, I can either do a brightness histogram, which will be kind of your standard histogram, which will just show a white graph showing you where the highlights and midtones and shadows are. Or you can switch it to RGB, so it'll do that for each color. And so let's go back to the menu. Let me go back to this. And you can see right now I have the histogram, the shooting information. If I hit info again, this is the shooting settings. And then if I go here one more time, I get just the shooting information. Then the histogram and the electronic level. Let me go through those one more time. So histogram, level, shooting information, then the one with all the settings. So let's go back through that. So back in the menu, now we're at a setting called reverse display. Now it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to show this to you, but essentially what it's used to do is when you flip the screen up in and it's facing you if you're in front of the camera, selfie mode, for lack of a better term, it will reverse or not reverse the image that it shows you. Now this comes in handy when, if you're wearing a shirt that has text on it, you might want that display reversed, you might not want that display reversed so that the text reads correctly. And give me just a second and I'll cut something in that shows you what I mean. Okay, this setup might seem a little bit odd, but I'm trying to show you how the reverse display functionality works. Just in case you're curious, this is the 11-22 lens on the M3, which is crazy wide, but also gives me crazy big hands. They're big hands, but they're not that big. So here's what we have. I got two little cars right here, and what you can see is that the red one's on this side, but in the display, it's on, oh God. See, this is actually why you use the reverse display, because of, anyway, red's here, but it's over there, and then the blue's here, but it's over there. And as I move the little blue car in and out, you can see in this video that the blue car is on the left side. But on the display, it's on the right side, and vice versa. This one's over here. So what happens is you might be taking a video, not exactly like this, but using this camera, damn it, might be using that camera, and you might be looking at yourself, and as you move your hands, you can see this is the hand that's moving. Look at it. But in the LCD of the M3, it's actually on the other side. And what this does is it freaks out your brain, and you can't figure out which way to move, and it gets confusing. However, looking at it this way does make text read correctly. Here, let me get that in a place where you can probably see it. Damn it. Again, this is why you want to reverse it, so that your brain doesn't freak out. So the text reads correctly when it's like this, but all of this stuff, it being over here, but it just, it hurts your brain. So what you can do if your brain is hurting is, you can go into your menu and do reverse display on. And now let's go back. All right. Now you can see that the red car is over here, and it's over on that side of the screen. And the blue car, it's over here, and it's on easy. That's a wind-up car. This car is on this side of the screen, and when I move this hand, it's on the same side. When I move this hand, it's on the same side. So this is a lot easier on your brain, which I like. However, one thing to keep in mind is that text on something like this will appear backwards, which, depending on what you're recording, may or may not be an issue. Keep in mind, though, that even if you have the display reversed, it's going to record the same way. So text will read correctly. This does not impact the actual recording of the video, just how it's displayed when it's flipped up like this, and that's reverse display. Piece of cake, right? Okay, so after reverse display, you get image review, and you have a couple of options here. You can turn it off. And this is just after you take an image, it's going to show you that image on the display for you to see it and see if you want to take another picture. You can turn that off so you can just get to shooting. You can have it be timed, or you can set it to hold. So just real quick, let me show you. So this is off. So I'm going to take this picture, and it's just going to flash, and then I'm back to shooting. If I do it for, say, 2 seconds, and I take a picture, it's going to review it for 1, 2, and then it's going to come back. It was 2-ish seconds. However, if I set it to hold, come back here, let me shoot a picture. Now that's the picture I just took, and it's going to stay there. It's going to hold there until I hit the shutter button halfway down again, and then it's going to reset. So depending on how long you want to look at the picture for, if you want control over it, or if you don't want to see it, or if you just want it to be shown for a little bit, you can pick the option you want. For those timed settings, so let's do 8 seconds. If you take the picture, and that's going to show for 8 seconds, you could also just hit the shutter button again and cancel out of that image review, so it doesn't have to show for 8 seconds. So just depending on what you want to use, you can set that up. I'm going to set mine back to hold. Then touch shutter. This is exactly what you think it would be. It allows you to touch the shutter to take an exposure, to release the shutter. So typically I don't have that enabled because when the camera is in autofocus, I like to use the touchscreen sometimes to select the focus point. And if you use that for the shutter as well, it's going to focus, then it's going to shoot it right then. I don't always want those to happen at the same time, so I usually disable it. But for now, just to show you how it works, enable. Let me go back to my screen here, and if I touch the screen, it takes a picture. Like I said, if it was autofocus, it would have focused and taken the shutter, which I wouldn't have wanted. I have it in manual focus right now, so it's not really that big of an issue. So let me go back in here and let me turn that off. So that is the first tab of the shoot menu. Okay, moving on to shoot 2. Now, since I'm in autofocus, some of these top ones aren't showing up. So tell you what, let me go back here real quick. Let me turn this off of manual focus, and then I can get back up here. So the first one, AF operation, you have 2 choices. You have one shot or servo. So this is kind of, well, the best way to describe this is one shot is you hold that shutter release down, it's gonna focus, and then you can hold that focus and move your camera. So you can kind of point it at something you want to focus on that might be on the left of the final shot that you want. You can kind of focus on it and then recompose the camera, shoot again. If you have it set in servo, it's going to be continually focusing while you have that shutter held halfway down, or while you have that shutter button held halfway down. So that's good for moving subjects, but the first one is better if you want to, if it's not a moving subject and you want to focus on it and then recompose. So it's just kind of up to you which one you want to use. So I'm gonna do one shot and then AF method. This is tracking plus the face. So it will try to track the face, or you can do 1-point autofocus. Sorry for the background noise. And then continuous autofocus. This one I struggle with a little bit. Yeah, it's just as simple, it's on or off. But basically, if you have it set to on, at this moment, this thing is focusing. Whether I'm holding down the shutter release or not, it's actually focusing in and out. So if I was moving this camera around, it's on a tripod right now, it's not moving, so the focus shouldn't be doing much, but it's getting power to it. If I were to move this, it would still be focusing. When this is good is if you are running around a lot and moving around a lot, it lessens the time it takes for it to focus on the next thing because it's already kind of focusing it as you're composing it. The downside is that that focus motor is always running. So even when you're just walking around and it's down by your side, that focus motor is running and it's trying to focus on stuff. What that means is that your battery is going to last a lot less. It's going to kill your battery. I usually leave it off. In fact, I don't even want to accidentally leave it on, so I'm turning it off. Now the next one is AF+MF, and what this allows you to do is if you have autofocus turned on and you have this setting turned on, after it autofocuses, you can still manually tweak the focus using the ring on an EFM lens. That's all it is really allowing you to do, is just kind of fine tune that autofocus. So it'll focus. If it's not quite what you wanted, you can tweak it a little bit with manual focus. Now let's look at manual focus peaking settings. So this is just, well, here I'll show you. I get back into manual focus. All this red stuff, that's the focus peaking. So if I go into here, it's either on or it's off. Cool. This is the sensitivity. So if I go to low, let's look at this. You can see it there, how much red is in there. And I don't know if it looked much different. I guess there was maybe a little bit more. Let's try that one more time. Yeah, okay. So it does show a little bit less when it's on low. So it's just kind of the sensitivity of what it determines to be in focus or not. Now it's just looking for contrast in the image for what it deems as in focus or not in focus. High is it's going to show more. I want to say it's kind of a higher sensitivity, but it's like a lower threshold, I guess, even though it's called high. But basically, high is going to show you more, low is going to show you less. So let's go back to high. And then you can pick the color, red, yellow, blue, and depending on what you're shooting a picture of, you might want to change this color. If you're shooting a picture of a red car, red is probably not a good color to use because you won't be able to see it. So you might want yellow or blue. On, high, red, that's where I had it before. Okay, so next up, image stabilization settings. Now this menu option may or may not show up depending on the type of lens you have attached. I currently have the kit lens, an 18-55 IS lens. So this setting shows up and I can turn the image stabilization off or on. Now depending on the type of lens you have attached, you might be able to vary which settings, like this dynamic image stabilization, I guess is not supported for this one, or it's hard-coded for this one. There might be other lenses where that option shows up as well. But for this lens, it doesn't, but this does allow me to turn the image stabilization on and off. For other lenses, like some of the EF lenses that you can adapt to this, I don't believe this would show up. I think you actually manage the image stabilization through the lens itself if it has the switch on it. Like the 70 to 200 IS, there's a switch on the actual lens where you turn it on and off. But for this lens, there's no switch, but it does have image stabilization. But it's an EFM, it's made for this camera, so I can control that through the menu system. This last option of lens aberration correction, you can look up what lens aberration is, but it's just the little fringing, the chromatic aberration. This one also tends to include vignetting into this correction as well. And depending on the lens you have, in the camera, there's a lot of information about a bunch of lenses, I'm sure probably mostly Canon lenses, where it has information in the camera to correct for some of the chromatic aberration and some of the vignetting. And this just kind of allows you to do that. You can turn it on or off. So peripheral illumination is the vignetting stuff, and chromatic aberration is the color fringing. And as you can see for the lens that I have connected, it's got the information to do that. So if I wanted to enable that stuff, which I do, I can turn that on right here. And so that is Shoot 2, the second menu of the Shoot menu tab thing. Okay, so leaving tab 2, we'll move on, hit the right button, move on to tab 3, and this is the Shoot 3 section, and the first one up is exposure bracketing. So what this will do is you'll set the image to take at a certain exposure, and it can take additional exposures to shoot 1 or 2 stops under, 1 or 2 stops over, and this is really helpful if you're going to be compositing these later, or if you're just not super sure of the exposure and you just kind of want to safeguard it a little bit. So by hitting select, this is where it's going to shoot, and then by using this dial, you can have it shoot 1 stop over, 1 stop under, up to 2 under and 2 over. This is used a lot in landscape photography, or even like interior, maybe real estate photography, where you have like a large window and it's super bright outside, but if you expose for that, the inside will be dark, but if you expose for the inside, the windows will be too bright, or they'll be clipped or blown out, or so you take a few shots and you piece them together later. And so one cool thing about this little camera, which is not in all cameras, I'm sure it's in a lot, but the other camera I have, it doesn't do this, is since I have this set to be bracketed, I have AEB turned on, even though I am set to only shoot a single image. Since I have AEB turned on and I hold down the shutter, it'll go ahead and shoot 3 images. My other camera, if you have automatic exposure bracketing turned on, you still have to hit the shutter 3 times if you have it in single fire mode, or you have to change it to continuous mode, and then it'll shoot the 3 exposures. So that is one thing that I like about this camera, is that just by setting that up, it knows, oh, I need to shoot 3 pictures, because obviously you're bracketing. And you don't have to go and do the additional step of changing it to continuous, and then when you exit out of automatic exposure bracketing, you don't also have to remember to turn it back into single exposure mode, single fire mode. You don't have to remember to turn it back into single fire mode as an additional step. So back into the menu. That's exposure bracketing. ISO speed. This is just your current ISO speed. You can set that and set it to whatever you want. Or you can set it to auto. Or if you just hit the info button, it'll automatically set to auto. There's other ways to access this. This is just a way to access it. And then ISO auto. This is just the maximum ISO you allow it to go to in automatic mode. So you can set it up down to 400. You can set it up to 12,800. And that's what it'll go to automatically. Personally, I have mine there. Sometimes I change it to there. I'm still playing with it personally to figure out which is the right mode for me. And it might vary. Like if you're walking around, you might not want it to go so high, but if you know it's going to be night, you're going to commonly get to 3200. Maybe you do let it go to 64, but not let it go to 12,800. So you'll just have to fiddle with that to figure out what's right for you. So let's go back again. Highlight tone priority, off or enable. So the common use case for this that I hear about all the time, personally I don't use this, but is snow. And at the moment it is August in Prague and there is no snow. So I can't really show you how this works. But what this does is when you're shooting outdoors in snow, since the snow is very white, quite often it will mess with the metering and the exposure, so it just doesn't quite get exposed right, and all the snow just looks completely white and blown out. This will, it's supposed to add kind of more subtle tonality to snow and make it exposed just a little bit better and show some gradation in it. And that's what that's for. Auto lighting optimizer. Now going in here, you can turn it off or kind of set the strength of it to what you want. Basically, this is if you take a picture and the camera sees that it's too dark or too bright, it will try to adjust it as it processes it. And yeah, you can have it do whatever you want. If you see it, if you turn it on high and you realize that it's not doing what you want, and sometimes it can add a little bit more noise than you might like, you can go back and turn it off. This one is just something you might want to fiddle with. By default, I believe it is set to this one, which is standard, which makes sense as a default selection. And so I think I've just left it there. It's been fine for me. Alternatively, you can hit the info button, which means if you have it in manual exposure, in M mode, like I do right now, it will turn it off. And let's leave it like that. Let's go with that for a while, see what happens. Metering mode. Tons of videos about different types of metering modes for different types of cameras. I'm not going to go too deep into it. This is just where you can, this is just one place where you can adjust where that is. You can also set this up to a function, a custom button later. You can change it through one of the information displays. There's a number of ways to change this. This is just one place to show it. And this is the default, the evaluative. I believe it's called evaluative, yeah. Then partial, spot, and center weighted. So one thing about this camera is if I put it on, let's put it on spot. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little circle right there. And if I actually go back and change it to partial, the circle's still there, but it's a little bit bigger. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's right in the center of the frame. So it gets a little bit bigger. So that's the difference between center and partial. But one thing is this is just a place where you can change it, and you can see the results of that on the information display as you look at the live view system. Now, flash control. This is not for the built-in flash. It's not for this guy. I believe it's just for external. Oh no, sorry. This is for that. So this is the built-in flash. So the metering you want to use, and then red eye reduction, built-in flash settings. It's just, you can do first curtain or second curtain. That's a whole thing you should look into if you're interested in it. I wouldn't worry about it unless you're getting very serious about flash, using flash and using external light sources. And then the exposure compensation. Again, there's a number of other ways to get to this. This is not the fastest way, but it does expose it here. Then the flash mode, you can do it manually or you can use basically automatic. This is their electronic through the lens version 2 algorithm for figuring out what the flash settings should be. It's essentially putting it in a more automatic mode based on what it sees in the exposure, or you can set it manually. Now, external flash, I don't have one put on, but I'll tell you what, I have one. So let's just put it on. If I remove this guy, and this flash is a bit large for this camera, but it will at least let us see what it does. So pardon me for just a second, as this moves around, it gets weird. Now, if I go in here, this just gives me settings that are also available on the back of the, on the flash, but I can access them through here. So there's just a bunch of different options. This is the ETTL and manual like we saw before, and then there's just more different additional settings available. Then the zoom, I can set that through here. And then if I go back, there's tons of custom settings for this particular flash. This just lets you go through all of those. You can do that on the flash as well. One thing that's kind of nice about here that I'm noticing is on the flash itself, all you get are little icons, maybe a couple of words to let you know what you're setting, and you kind of have to figure them out or read the manual to figure them out. This one actually get the words, which is kind of nice. Beep, light disruption, LCD panel illumination, slave flash battery check. It's actually kind of handy. So that's what those settings do, and then you can clear all those if you want as well. So give me just a second, I'm gonna take this flash off of this camera. And that is the third tab of the shoot menu. Now I know this is taking a little bit longer, but I'm trying not to just like go through them and let you figure out what they are. I'm trying to tell you a little bit about them and why you might use some of them. So there's only 2 more tabs left for this shoot menu, and yeah, so we'll just keep going. So the fourth one, custom white balance. Now this is one of the white balance settings you can pick. There's a lot of preset white balances for tungsten, fluorescent, and daylight, and all this other stuff. But you can also set a custom one. And to do that, I'll do another video sometime about setting the custom white balance in here. Basically, you take a picture of something you want to be neutral. It could be a white wall, it could be a white piece of paper, it could be an 18% gray thing. You can take that picture, go in here, and then actually set it. You can pick an image in here to set it. This one wouldn't be a very good one to choose because it's just a bunch of different colors. Then you can actually kind of manually go in and correct stuff if you want. I have never messed with this, but it's neat that it's there. And then all the various picture styles. Again, these picture styles apply to the JPEG. If you're in the RAW, you get the RAW stuff. Like for example, even though it's monochrome here, and I'll take this picture so I can show you. So that JPEG is now monochrome. The RAW image, on the other hand, I should be able to adjust that. Okay, moving on. These are also used for the video modes. I'll go into that at some other time. And then if you hit the info button, let me just go back for a second. If I go in here to neutral, let me put it on faithful, which is what I typically leave it on, 0, 0, 0. I hit the info button and I can actually modify this a little bit, 0 to 7. So you get, those 4 numbers are for sharpness, are for contrast, saturation, and color tone. So if you are seeing some oddities in how it's rendering colors or anything like that, you can go in here and look at a picture profile to see if that can help you adjust it. Okay, so the high ISO speed noise reduction. Real quick, let me go in here and you can see you can turn it off. And this just allows the camera to try to reduce the noise in camera before it saves the file. You'll see an additional option here that's disabled. Now this option is disabled a lot. So if you have, let me show you real quick. If you have long exposure noise reduction turned on, which I don't, but if you have that turned on, it won't work, or it won't be enabled. If you are using automatic exposure bracketing, it won't be enabled. Additionally, if you're shooting RAW, it won't be enabled. That's just that one particular way of doing the noise reduction, because it's going to take multiple shots and it's going to try to combine them together to get to reduce the noise in the image. So in order to, so at the moment it's disabled, but I don't have long exposure noise reduction turned on, so that's not causing it. I also don't have exposure bracketing turned on. That's not the problem. What is the problem is the fact that I have this. So now it's just shooting JPEG. And if I go back, I should now have the ability to do it. So it'll just do it in JPEGs and it's just going to save a JPEG. So you can't do that in RAW. It's I've never tried it. It's an interesting concept of taking multiple exposures and trying to piece them together to reduce the noise in them. So I might have to try that out someday. So let me go back and set this thing up like I use it. Trying to, when I'm done with this, I'm trying to have it so that the camera is still pretty much in the way that I typically shoot. So let's go back. Now this last one here is long exposure noise reduction. So off, auto, and on. Now what this is going to do is it will, well, it'll try to reduce the noise in long exposures for 1 second or longer. Now it's the noise that you get from long exposures is different than the noise you get from high ISO. From high ISO, it's kind of a grainy, noisy thing, but in long exposures, it's just caused by different things and it looks very different. It's more like little individual hot pixels, I think is what people tend to call them, in the exposure. And so this is a way to try to do that. So for 1 second or longer, it may try to do the long exposure noise reduction. So I can't recall what causes it to go to auto. I think for auto it has to be less than 1600 because sometimes if you're using over 1600 ISO, it can cause other problems and make the image look noisier. But you can turn it on for anything that's longer than a second, or you can turn it off to never use it. If you are taking exposures that are less than 1 second, this setting doesn't matter. It never gets applied. And one thing to keep in mind is if you do have this on or set to auto and you do have an exposure that's 1 second or longer, when you take that exposure, in order to do what it's going to do, it needs to take a second exposure. So if you take a 5-second exposure of the sky or stars, it's going to take an additional 5-second exposure. And it uses that second exposure to do some math and to create the reduced noise image. And I can do a video, an additional video on this. It's a little bit too deep for this. But if I have created that video, you'll see a link up in a corner somewhere. If I haven't, it's still on my list to do. But it uses something called dark image subtraction. So if you Google that, and I don't have a video, you'll check that out. You can see how it does what it does. But you can replicate what it does manually by manually taking two exposures and doing some stuff. And hopefully I'll do that one day. But for now, it's just something to keep in mind. The big takeaway here is if you do have this on or set to auto, and you take a 5-second exposure, the camera is going to take an additional 5-second exposure to create the image. So just keep that in mind. So moving on to number 5, which is the last of our shoot menus and almost the end of this particular video. This gets into the movie recording stuff. So moving up to the top, you get the recording size of the FHDs are 1920 by 1080. The HD is at 720, and VGA is 640 by 480. And then you get the frame rates of 2997, 24, 2398. You can do 60 frames a second at 720 regular HD, and then VGA, if you want to use that, they've added that in with 30 seconds. You can also see the time that you can fit on your card. So these are just for the frame rates, for the different frame rates. It's the same resolution, it's just different frame rate. 24 is supposed to be more cinematic. That's what people say, but you can pick whichever one you want to use there. Sound recording I don't have available in this mode. Let's see if I change it. For some reason, at some point I switched it to Aperture Priority. Let me switch it back to manual and see if I can get it back. Nope, fair enough. So sound recording will let you adjust kind of like the sound levels and how it does sound. There's another, obviously the movie setting will let you have access to that particular, or the movie mode will let you have access to that setting. There's some other ones as well. I'll cover that a little bit later, but it's essentially just the settings for sound. Then maybe Servo AF. And it's just, do you want to use the Servo autofocus or not? Why you would need to think about it is if you are using the microphone input in the camera, some lenses are rather loud when they do the servo focusing, and it could come through on the sound of your video. Some of the STM lenses that Canon makes now don't really suffer from that as much. They're pretty silent, but that's why they provide this option for you to enable or disable. And then autofocus with the shutter button during movie mode. And that's just, do you want to use the shutter to focus, or and then, or do you want to use the touch display? That's your other option. All right, I know that was long. Sorry. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I had to talk about it, and you had to listen to it. But I hope it was helpful. I hope there was something in there that maybe you found some value. Maybe you learned something you didn't know about before. Maybe it's like 40-ish minutes of your life you wish you could get back. But at least you didn't have to read. If you did find this helpful, and you want to see the other parts that I'm doing, click on the subscribe link and it'll notify you and do things to let you know another video has been uploaded. If you liked this video or the content that was in it, click the like button. Validates that I'm doing something right with my life. And if you didn't like this video, I don't really know how you made it this far. I mean, this wasn't like a little 3-minute, if I don't like it, I'll just power through. Sorry. In the next video, I'll go through some more of the shooting menus for other modes, and then there's the setup one, and then there's a custom menu you can do stuff with. It's all very exciting. If you have questions about anything you saw, post them below and I'll do my best to answer them, or I'll make up an answer that makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about. You won't know. Thanks again for watching. I hope it was helpful. If not, that's okay. Whatever.